Learning outcomes. After studying this module, you shall be able to number 1, know about the process of attribution. Number 2, learn the various theories of attribution. Number 3, identify the biases and errors in attribution. And number 4, evaluate the application of attribution theories in various domains. Introduction. Attribution theory is the area of psychology concerned with when and how people ask why questions. It began with the work of Fritz Heider in 1958. Heider proposed that all the individuals act as naive scientists when exploring and understanding their environments, both physically and socially. People therefore act not only to interpret the physical aspects of environment around them, but also the underlying causal aspects. He argued further that humans have two strong motives. Number 1, the need to form a coherent understanding of the world, and number 2, the need to control the environment. According to social psychologists, such a tendency occurs as we want to know the cause and effect relationships in their social world. This helps us to predict how people will act in the future. Therefore, attribution refers to our efforts to understand the causes behind others' behavior and on some occasions causes behind our behavior too. People are especially likely to make causal attribution when something unexpected or unpleasant happens, which creates a need for greater predictability. The theory of correspondent reference is people engage in a variety of action, but only some of those reveal their personal qualities. When attributions are dispositional or internal attributions to the person, while others are situational in nature or external attribution to the environment. The classic theory of correspondent reference deals with how we use information about others' behavior as a basis for making an inference about the various traits they possess. Hence, the theory deals with the fact that how we decide on the basis of others' overt actions that they possess certain traits or dispositions. The task is not easy as it seems. Often, one behaves in a certain way not due to disposition but due to external factors. Socially, desirable behavior is not clearly revealing of personal characteristics. We cope with such complications by focusing our attention on certain types of actions which are most likely to prove informative in nature. Number 1, we consider only behavior that is freely chosen and largely ignore ones that were forced on the individual. Number 2, we pay careful attention to the actions that show non-common effects, that is, that can be caused by one specific factor but not by others. Number 3, we pay greater attention to actions by others that are low in social desirability than to actions that are high on this dimension. Therefore, according to the theory of correspondent inference, we are more likely to conclude that behavior of others reflects their stable traits when that behavior is freely chosen, has non-common effects, and is low in social desirability dimension. Covariance theory of attribution. This theory of attribution proposed by Kelly is also referred to as covariance theory. Kelly covariance model refers to the fact that people try to see if a particular effect and a particular cause go together across different situations. According to Kelly, to answer why other people behavior act the way they behave, we focus on three major types of information. These informations are as follow. Number one, consensus. Consensus refers to the extent to which other people react to a given stimulus in the same manner as the person being considered. The higher the proportion of people who act in the same way, higher the consensus. Number two, consistency. Consistency in this case refers to the extent to which person in question reacts to the situation in the same way on other occasions over time period. Number three, distinctiveness. Distinctiveness refers to the extent to which this person reacts in the same manner to other different stimuli in hand. According to Kelly, we are most likely to attribute another's behavior to internal causes in those conditions in which consensus and distinctiveness are low, but consistency is high. In contrast, we are more likely to attribute another's behavior to external causes when all three are high. Finally, we usually attribute another's behavior to a combination of internal and external factors when consensus is low, but consistency and distinctiveness are high in nature. Three-dimensional model of attribution. Weiner developed a theoretical model that has become very influential in social psychology today. According to his attribution theory, people try to interpret causes to an event or behavior. Hence, a three-stage process underlies an attribution. Number one, behavior must be observed or perceived. Number two, behavior must be determined to be intentional in nature. Number three, behavior attributed to internal or external causes. According to Weiner, the most important factors affecting attributions are ability, efforts, task difficulty, and luck. Therefore, he classified attributions along three causal dimensions like A. Locus of control, internal or external. B. Stability, that is whether causes change over time or not. And C. Controllability, that is causes one control versus causes one cannot control. When we succeed, we attribute successes to internal factors like our skill. When a rival succeeds, we intend to attribute it to external factors like, for instance, luck. In contrast, when we fail, we will more likely attribute causes to situational factors rather than to internal factors. When others fail, internal attribution is often used. errors and biases in attribution. The correspondence bias, number one. This is also referred to as the fundamental attribution error. We attribute others' behavior to their personality, traits, or attitudes rather than to the situation they are in. Jones in 1979 labeled correspondence bias as the tendency to explain others' actions as stemming from dispositions, even in the presence of clear situational causes. This tendency occurs in a wide range of contexts but appears to be strongest in situations in which both consensus and distinctiveness are low and when we are trying to predict others' behavior in the far off future rather than the immediate future. The actor-observer effect. The actor-observer effect is the tendency to attribute own behavior to situational, that is external causes, but that of others to dispositional, that is internal ones. For instance, when we see other person trip and fall, we tend to attribute this even to his or her clumsiness. If we trip, we attribute it to situational causes such as slippery floor. Why does this occur? It occurs because we are aware of our actions and the external factors affecting it, but are less aware of such factors when we turn our attention to the actions of other people around us. In certain circumstances, this effect is weakened. The self-serving bias, the tendency to attribute our own positive outcomes to internal causes but negative outcomes to external causes is known as the self-serving bias. This can be explained on the basis of the following. One, cognitive model, which suggests that this bias stems from certain tendencies in the way we process social information. It suggests that we attribute positive outcomes to internal ones and negative to external ones as we expect to succeed and have a tendency to attribute expected outcomes to internal causes more than to the external causes. Number two, motivational explanation. This suggests that this bias stems from our need to protect and enhance our self-esteem or the related desire to look good to other people. Research evidence offers more support to motivational explanation. This strength of this bias varies across cultures. It is weaker in cultures where emphasis is on group outcomes and harmony than in Western cultures. Third, the defensive attribution hypothesis. The defensive attribution hypothesis refers to a set of beliefs that held by an individual which helps them in defending themselves from the fear that they will be in the victim of an unfortunate incident. Normally, defensive attribution are made when individuals witness or come to know of a mishap happening to another person. In such situations, attributions of responsibility to the victim or the one responsible for the mishap will depend upon the variety of or severity of the outcomes of the mishap. This attribution will also be affected by the level of the personnel and situational similarity between the individual and the victim. Forer or Barnum effect. This refers to the observation that individuals consider highly accurate description of their personality that are supposedly tailored specially for them, but are vague and general enough to apply to a wide range of people. This effect also provides an explanation for the widespread acceptance of the same beliefs and practices such as astrology, graphology, fortune telling, among others. Some biases in attribution represent cognitive shortcuts or heuristics. Others came from people's effort to satisfy their own needs and motives. Our attribution of bias comes from a combination of cognitive and motivational needs. To summarize, number one, attribution refers to our efforts to understand the causes behind others' behavior and, on some occasions, causes behind our behavior too. Number two, the main theories of attribution are the theory of correspondent inference, covariance theory, and three-dimensional theory. Number three, the errors and biases in attribution include the correspondence bias, fundamental attribution error, and the actor-observer effect, the self-serving bias, and the defensive attribution hypothesis. Next, the attribution-related research has been applied to diverse areas as motivations in education, personality, organizational, and clinical psychology.
After studying this module, you shall be able to know about the process of attribution, learn the various theories of attribution, identify the biases and errors in attribution, and evaluate the applications of attribution theory in various domains. Attribution theory is the area of psychology concerned with when and how people ask why questions. It began with the work of Fritz Heider. According to social psychologists, we want to know the cause and effect relationship in the social world. Therefore, attribution refers to our efforts to understand the causes behind others' behavior and, on some occasions, causes behind our behavior too. The classic theory of correspondent inference by Jones and Davis deals with how we use information about others' behavior as a basis for making an inference about the various traits they possess. We focus our attention on certain types of actions. We consider only behavior that is freely chosen. We pay careful attention to actions that show non common effects, that is, that can be caused by one specific factor but not by others. We pay greater attention to actions by others that are low in social desirability. Therefore, we are more likely to conclude that the behavior of others reflects their stable traits when that behavior is freely chosen, has non common effects, and is low in social desirability. The covariation model by Kelly refers to the fact that people try to see if a particular effect and a particular cause go together across different situations. To answer the question why about others' behavior, we focus on three major types of information. Consensus refers to the extent to which other people react to a given stimulus in the same manner as the person being considered. Consistency refers to the extent to which the person in question reacts to the stimulus in the same way on other occasions over time. Distinctiveness refers to the extent to which this person reacts in the same manner to other different stimuli. According to Kelly, we are most likely to attribute another's behavior to internal causes when consensus and distinctiveness are low but consistency is high. In contrast, we are more likely to attribute another's behavior to external causes when all three are high. We attribute behavior to a combination of internal and external factors when consensus is low but consistency and distinctiveness are high. Sometimes there are several possible causal explanations for behavior, and we need guidelines to determine which attribution is correct. Kelly added a second major principle used for making causal attribution, which she referred to as the discounting principle. We are less likely to attribute an effect to any particular cause if more than one potential cause is likely. The augmentation principle is when we know that there are constraints, costs, or risks involved in taking an action, the action is attributed more to the actor than otherwise. According to the three-dimensional model of attribution given by Weiner, people try to interpret causes of an event or behavior. Hence, a three-stage process underlies an attribution. Behavior must be perceived, behavior must be determined to be intentional, and behavior attributed to internal or external causes. According to Weiner, the most important factors affecting attributions are ability, effort, task difficulty, and luck. Therefore, he classified attributions along three causal dimensions: locus of control, stability, and controllability. Do we perceive the events in our own lives and others as determined by fate, that is, forces that are outside our control? Research findings indicate that we actually accept both. We believe that both fate and our own actions shape our lives. However, we don't give these two causes equal weight at all times. This was studied by Burrus and Roars. Results showed that while we often use fate as a powerful causal factor in our lives, we mix such beliefs with faith in our own abilities to influence our outcomes and our lives. Now let's look at the biases and errors in attribution. The first one is the correspondence bias. This is also referred to as the fundamental attribution error. Jones labeled correspondence bias as the tendency to explain others' actions as stemming from dispositions even in the presence of clear situational causes. It occurs because dispositional causes are easier to notice than situational ones. We notice situational causes but give them insufficient weight in our attribution. Also, we make situational attribution for the behavior of people we know very well than for those we know less well. Fundamental attribution error appears to be stronger in cultures that emphasize individual freedom. Individualistic cultures than in collectivistic cultures that emphasize group membership, conformity, and interdependence. In individualistic cultures, there is a norm of internality, the view that people should accept responsibility for their own outcomes. In collectivistic cultures, such a norm is weak or absent. The actor-observer effect is the tendency to attribute our own behavior to situational causes, but that of others to dispositional ones. It occurs because we are aware of our actions and the external factors affecting it, but are less aware of such factors when we turn our attention to the actions of other people. In certain circumstances, this effect is weakened. According to Miller and Ross, the tendency to attribute our own positive outcomes to internal causes but negative outcomes to external causes is known as the self-serving bias. This can be explained on the basis of the cognitive model, which suggests that this bias stems from certain tendencies in the way we process social information. The motivational explanation suggests that this bias stems from our need to protect and enhance our self esteem or the related desire to look good to others. The defensive attribution hypothesis refers to a set of beliefs held by an individual which helps them in defending themselves from the fear that they will be the victim of an unfortunate incident. An example of defensive attribution is the just world hypothesis, according to which good things happen to good people and bad things happen to bad people. Another example of defensive attribution is the optimistic bias, in which people believe that positive events happen to them more often than to others and negative events happen to them less often than to others. Forer or Barnum effect refers to the observation that individuals consider highly accurate descriptions of their personality that are supposedly tailored specifically for them but are vague and general enough to apply to a wide range of people. Attribution has received great attention within psychological research. Attribution related research has been applied to diverse areas like education, personality, organizational, and clinical psychology. Fosterling presented an application of attribution theory to clinical psychology. This relates to the use of psychotherapy and behavioral modification within clinical psychology. One of the main factors affecting depression is self defeating patterns of attribution. Hence, the therapies for treating depression, especially cognitive behavioral therapies, often focus on changing such attributions. Attribution theory has also been used to explain the motivational differences between high and low achievers. Let us now summarize what we have learned in this module. Attribution refers to our efforts to understand the causes behind others' behavior and on some occasions causes behind our behavior too. The main theories of attribution are the theory of correspondent inference, covariation theory, and three-dimensional theory. The errors and biases in attribution include the correspondence bias or the fundamental attribution error, the actor-observer effect, the self-serving bias, and defensive attribution hypothesis. Attribution related research has been applied to diverse areas.